Right, welcome to REI Investor Talk. I'm Neil Peterson, founder and content-in-chief of Real Estate Investor, South Africa's leading platform for property news, insights, and investor education. And today we're unpacking the real impact of the 2025 budget speech, interest rate expectations, and what this all means for residential property investors. And with inflation in check and whispers of rate cuts on the table, we could be standing on the edge of a real opportunity for savvy investors. And joining me today is Renier Crick. He's the CEO of Combined Finance and Sentinel Homes. And Renier is a seasoned property finance expert. He's also an attorney and a thought leader in the non-bank lending and housing sector. Renier, great to have you with us today.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks for inviting me.
No, absolute pleasure. So let's start with the big one. What's your take on the budget speech and how it impacts residential property investors in 2025?
So I think, Neil, the first point is that the budget is a rather timid exercise in the minister's authority. Essentially what we've gotten is that he's played within the two parameters that he'd been handed by the process. The first being the fact that he couldn't hike VAT and probably couldn't introduce any other taxes to a significant degree because of the Laffer curve and those kinds of things that suddenly are emerging quite often in the public discourse. Previously used to be rather arcane. And
maybe just share the Laffer curve, just share it with the audience, just elaborate a little bit for those that are not in the know the Laffer curve.
So the idea of the Laffer curve is that the tax collection doesn't just go up if you put taxes up. And so putting taxes up results in a U-shaped graph. So at some point you have the optimal tax collection, and if you put tax up further, then the tax revenue actually declines. And the reason that happens is very simple. When people are confronted with taxes that they view as oppressive, they simply start doing things that avoid tax. Even though it might otherwise have been costly. The higher you make the marginal tax rate, the more attractive strategies become that avoid tax, because these strategies also often cost money. And so at some point, as we say in Afrikaans, you can't put up tax because you're not going to collect anything in addition to what you've collected. I think the other parameter that the minister had on the other end was that there's no political will inside of the ANC, at least, to cut the public sector wage bill, which is really what we need to do. The government sector is bloated relative to our peers in other countries, being other countries. And so that's the real thing that needs to happen, is a little bit of austerity. But I think that'll be too costly for the currently, I'm not a political analyst, but my impression is that that'll be too costly for the sort of centrist faction that is currently holding the reins in the ANC and probably will oust them. And so they're doing what amounts basically to realpolitik, which is keeping that thing untouched, right? The entire wage negotiation, the government employees are getting a nice little raise this year, pre-agreed, and that's going to be the end of the matter. And so I think ideally we would want the minister and his team at Treasury to start engaging with the other departments to cut at least the wasteful expenditure and also the questionable expenditure. There where there is still graft hiding, we need to root it out. Because if we can just stop the graft train, then we're probably going to have a lot of extra reserves in the coffer. But now what the minister did is that in the short term, he sort of charted a course in between those two parameters that had been given him. And he basically introduced no new taxes, is his line, but that's disingenuous because of bracket creep, right? He's not adjusted the tax tables. And so everyone is going to pay the same amount of tax on their current salary if it doesn't increase. And if your salary increases, then you're going to be paying more tax than you otherwise would have paid. And that is bracket creep is what is known amongst economists and fiscal planners as tax by stealth, right? So it's tax under a cloak. It doesn't look like a new tax, but the minister knows what he's doing. And then the other thing really is the fuel levy, which obviously is also a bit of a just a little bit of revenue additionally. 16 cents on a litre, I believe, is the escalation. That's going to be mildly inflationary, but we can probably afford it given that currently, the oil price is low. So the minister's budget is very timid. It doesn't really address the the prime concerns that we should be addressing from a fiscal policy point of view. And factually, it kicks the can down the road, which is what we've been having for very long now when it comes to fiscal policy with Treasury because of the political climate. Obviously, under the Zuma administration, it was for a different reason, which is that they wanted it to be lax and kick the can down the road because there was this siphoning of money through state capture. And now we're kicking the can down the road because the centrists and the faction inside the ANC, I believe, that really does try to do the thing that's best for the country, are trying to cling to control of the party, which will very certainly be wrested from them if they erode confidence amongst the public sector officials who likely are also, their voters. So, as far as the budget in general is concerned, I would give the minister low marks. As far as the residential industry is concerned, we know that the fuel levy is going to be inflationary, and the bracket creep is probably going to dampen affordability, which is the prime problem at the moment for everyone in South Africa and all around the world. Wage increases have not kept pace with asset price growth, and so affordability is a key constraint when it comes to the acquisition of housing. And we also don't have housing stock development that is happening fast enough due to regulatory things and all sorts of other things. And so the problem is that prices are increasing even faster than they should be, and the invisible hand of the market doesn't have the necessary space to rise up and meet the demand where it is. In the Western Cape, it's the most pointedly unaffordable, because of immigration and the fact that the housing supply hasn't broadened to accommodate that yet. And so at the moment, affordability is a key constraint, and this budget probably puts it under a little bit of pressure. Good news for the property industry is that the transfer duty tables were adjusted already. That happens by fiat. The minister just makes regulations, and so the transfer duty tables were adjusted so that there's transfer duty relief in the market. And that already came into effect on the 1st of April 2025, irrespective of budget 1 or 2 or 3, we already have that. And so as far as the residential industry is concerned, that's what we have. There's not a lot to say, except, consumers are going to be slightly more under pressure from a tax point of view.
Yeah, well, we've got the interest rate MPC sitting again next week. And you mentioned before interest rates are currently too high. What's the ideal level in your view, and how do you see it panning out next week in terms of where they're going to go, and how would a rate cut shift that investor sentiment and affordability situation?
Neil, so there's a bit of a journey we have to take to answer that question. The first thing I think is that the Stats SA published their price tracking data series for residential prices in the various metros. And what we can see is that the graph has turned in the entire country. So green shoots appearing everywhere in the property industry. Because as you and I have discussed before, people manifest changes in life stages through property trading. You have a child, you buy somewhere with a lawn. You have another child, you need a bigger lawn. You have teenagers, you buy somewhere with a place that they can play pool and smoke surreptitiously. And then when you're old and the teenagers are out the house, you buy something smaller because now you don't want to clean all that real estate. So those changes in life stages happen in the background, notwithstanding the economic climate, and are mostly unrelated. It's a separate system to the economic reality. And so what happens is that if it's disadvantageous, or the market judges it as a disadvantageous stage or a situation to buy property or sell property, then generally volumes go down and prices go down. But while that happens, if there's less volume, then all of these life changes are still happening in the background, which means that those people who are experiencing these changes, they want to buy a different property and sell the current one, but they're not doing it now because the economic climate is judged to be disadvantageous. And so what happens is that is how pent-up demand builds up in the background. Now what happens is that, something needs to change in order to stimulate the spilling of the pent-up demand into the market. And obviously, pent-up demand was built in a high interest rate environment when interest rates suddenly went up and there was high inflation due to various international things that happened. And also because we had that watershed election where for the first time now the ANC was going to need to govern in a coalition. And so as a result of those two things, there was a bit of pent-up demand building up. There was low volumes in 2024. But now, we got the best case with a government of national unity, which is that the ANC didn't align itself with parties to its left. And the second thing is that the interest rates have already come down with 75 basis points. And the combination of those two things seems to already have been enough to bring some of that pent-up demand into the market, not only in places where previously we had hotspots like the Western Cape, but sort of on a broad-based basis, including all of the various metros. So that's already started to happen. As far as interest rates are concerned, the fact of the matter is that we do have interest rates in South Africa that are too high. The Reserve Bank have been very good at messaging, which includes that they've, through their messaging, convinced all of us to focus on the magnitude of the move rather than on having to justify the real interest rate. So if you take the current cost of capital, and let's assume that to be prime, and you remove from that percentage the inflation rate, so 11 minus 3, then or 2.8, then the real interest rate in South Africa at the moment is about 8.2%. That is roughly double what the average was during the term of the previous governor, Jill Marcus, right? Because a real interest rate of 8.2% is exceptionally high, and it places a large barrier in front of fixed capital formation. So we have a problem in South Africa that we have a workforce that looks a certain way. We need a lot of manual labor, a lot of unskilled labor in the economy to employ the workforce that we currently have. And we face the problem that we're rapidly deindustrializing. And industrialization requires fixed capital formation. People need to build things like factories. And that's not happening because the cost of capital is too high. So the Reserve Bank seems to be arguing that they must solve the inflation problem before they solve the economic growth problem. And I would submit that that is the wrong way around. That is the hawks arguing like hawks. And at some point, we're going to have to hold accountable this institution, which has become something of a holy cow in South Africa. I think we have this instinct to cling to institutions that seem to be doing their job properly, but it has the effect of sort of rubbing them in bubble wrap and transporting them to the clouds where they're viewed as some sort of holy icon. The Reserve Bank is made of, and the MPC is made up of 6 individuals who definitely do not have the gift of foresight. And at some point, we must bring them to account and say, listen, chaps, we understand you think you're doing one thing, but please explain to us. And you can't just say the model says, because we can't see the model, right? The model says is like saying some scripture says, and I'm not allowed to read the scripture, or we can't have that level of opacity. So show us the model then. I mean, there are a lot of smart statisticians in this country and econometricians who can look at it and see whether your calculations are correct. How do we know, for instance, that you don't have a database error or a calculation error in one of your Excel cells? Yeah, so you can't just say the model says and there are risks to the upside. We've had this risks to the upside excuse now for the past 6 meetings, and yet the inflation that is manifesting is exceptionally pallid, right? We still have inflation below the target band. So the Reserve Bank says that its only mandate, and therefore its only objective, is to target inflation between 3 and 6%, which is its mandate, and to anchor expectations around the midpoint of that range, which is 4.5%, right? So if that is the case, then there is no remaining excuse to not cut the interest rates much more drastically than they currently are. Risks to the upside is no longer an excuse, because that's been the excuse all along, based on this opaque model that we don't have access to. So I'm not fond of it. I don't think it's right. I don't think that people care about the rate at which the price of bread is growing if they can't even afford bread to begin with. And I think that we should be solving the economic growth problem in a much more sort of diligent way. What does seem to be happening is that the Reserve Bank is slightly disingenuous, and they seem to be keeping us at the ready for the new mandate that they seem to be negotiating with Treasury. So the Deputy Minister, Mr. Masondo, has alluded to the fact that they're negotiating with SARB to adjust the mandate. It seems as though, if I take the whispers in the back rooms that I have come across, that they want to have a single fixed point target, and that it is likely to be like around 3%. But it's disingenuous and immoral, I think, for the Reserve Bank to manage the current monetary policy based on a mandate that has not been agreed to, especially since they've been preaching to us all along that the only thing they really care about and will ever care about is their mandate, the current one of which says 3 to 6% anchored around the midpoint, and does not say 3% fixed target, and most definitely does not require them to adjust based on that consideration.
So you're saying keep it the same, or do you see a rate cut?
No, we need to cut it.
Yes, no. But what is the prediction, given that, the background that
So my prediction is that they're going to cut it by 25 points. And I think this is something that you're putting your finger on it, right, Neil, which is that many of the commentators in the market are trying to predict what the very overly hawkish and slightly disingenuous MPC is going to do, right? And based on this consensus, most people think we fall in one of two camps. We're either going to have nothing or we're going to have 25 basis points. I would add my voice to the we're going to have 25 basis points camp. But I personally feel that the Reserve Bank can probably cut by 50 bips this meeting and 50 bips the next meeting, and perhaps even 50 bips the meeting after that, and we'll still be fine. So I don't like the 25 basis point cut, but I'll take it because it seems as though the market is reacting to it.
Okay, and so what do you think the immediate knock-on effects could be if, let's say, at 0.25 or even a 0.5?
So definitely, I think affordability will improve. At the moment, according to the statistics that are published by the National Credit Regulator, home loan delinquency is at the highest level that it's almost ever been at.
Wow.
So in the past 3 years, home loan delinquency, in other words, people who have at more than R0 outstanding in unpaid home loan installments, delinquency has gone up by about 35%.
Wow.
And it is currently above 12%. So that is a very high rate for South Africa. Generally, delinquency never breaches about 9.5 or 10%. And, so delinquency at the moment is very high. The people who have home loans in the country are definitely clearly under pressure. And households that are under pressure don't spend. And if we don't have household spending, we can't turn the engine of the economy. So we need to alleviate the pressure, and I think that's one of the first things that will start happening is that the delinquency rate will improve. And if the delinquency rate improves, then obviously things look on the up and up. Because as things stand, it's going to take a little bit of time, and then all of this distressed stock is going to start spilling in the market, which obviously is going to have a downward impact on prices. So unless we can turn that thing around before the stock comes spilling into the market, because obviously there's a lead time between becoming delinquent and eventually being forced to sell the property. And so if we can turn it around before we reach the end point where people start being forced to sell the property and the stress being advertised in the market, we can turn it around, and obviously that'll be good for the market, and it will sustain the recovery, which has already started to become evident in statistics. So we have green shoots, but we are by no means have blue gum trees yet. It's just small little seeds emerging from the ground, and we need to nurture them, and we need to foster them, because this is part of the economic growth story that we need, right? Which is that property prices are growing, the market is performing, etc. Because that is also the stimulant the stimulation for the creation of new housing stocks, so building plants and whatever, that we need, that creates jobs, specifically the kind of manufacturing jobs in construction that we need in South Africa to accommodate the workforce that we have.
Yeah. So we're still seeing, many investors are still cautious based on just what you've said. I mean, due to this whole economic and political uncertainty. So, I mean, what advice do you give to those investors and also those homeowners that in this current market climate?
So everyone likes to quote Warren Buffett around the dry flash, but very few people then have the strength of their convictions to act on Mr. Buffett's aphorisms. Mr. Buffett, bless him, says, "Be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful." Now is the time to implement that philosophy if you believe that aphorism reflects something that is true in the world. And if you want to buy an investment property, buy it, right? Because the market is turning against you in the sense that the day of slightly distressed or rather willing sellers is becoming something of the past. Especially in areas that have been underperforming. So if you take, for instance, say the city of Johannesburg, where the property industry or the property market has been sort of a laggard in terms of performance, that is also turning in terms of the statistics that are available to us. And it's very clear that this is a broad-based recovery in the market. Immigration is also seemingly turning around. There are a lot of commentators alluding to this. And it's just a question of supply and demand. So there's not enough supply in the Western Cape anymore of houses that the people who want to immigrate can afford or can find value in and afford. Because, for 3 million rand, say in Randburg, you can buy a mansion. For 3 million rand in Durbanville, there's not a lot on offer. So that value differential is starting to impact on people's decisions. We've already seen that with, say, people coming to the Western Cape, and instead of buying in the suburbs of Cape Town, are instead going to places like, say, Mossel Bay, which is close to the George Airport, or even more recently going to places like Langebaan and specifically St. Helena Bay, which is a little bit of a property boom town at the moment, because if you don't have to be close to an office because you're a remote worker or you work abroad periodically or whatever, then the lifestyle benefit and also the cost differential is very attractive in a little place, say, like St. Helena Bay, which used to be a small little hamlet with a very naughty smell, and now is a boom town, but the naughty smell is still there.
Great.